Okay, we are at the bottom of Daf Chafal of my days, but I have to, as Jen Psaki used to say, I have to circle back to a couple of things we learned yesterday because there were some oftener things that we missed. Was a public expression. I only heard it from her. So yesterday we had a discussion where the Gemara said that someone who's choshet for arayas wouldn't be believed in arayas. And the Gemara said, the Brisa says, he's not Nemon to say that a woman is not a Neshishish, because Kubi is only doing it because he wants to have a relationship with her. But he would be believed to say that the woman is a Neshishish. The Gemara asked, Shita, of course he would be Nemon to say that she was a Neshishish, because he's making that woman unavailable to him, not available to him. So the Gemara asked, Mao de Tema ha divalei. No, he wants her to be a Neshishish because it's more fun to be Mizana with a Neshishish. Frek to Arach from there, if he knows he's lying, she's not a Neshishish anyway. So he's not accomplishing anything. He's still not being Mizana with a Neshishish because he knows she's not a Neshishish. So the whole concept doesn't make sense. So the Arach from there answers that people, when they're so engulfed and gripped by their taiva, that they're even wanting to make imaginary barriers that they could then breach through, and that gives them a high. That gives them part of what they're trying to achieve in their quest to run after taivas. But Reuven Margolius says something very, very interesting, and he says, look at the pasuk that the Gemara quoted. Maim gnuv mim taku. V'goimer. Often v'goimer means look at the second half of the pasuk and see what it says. So it says at the end of the pasuk, Maim gnuv mim taku. V'lechem sesarim yanim yinam. The lechem sesarim means when you have to sneak away to do the avera. Maybe that's what he wants. He wants it that there should be a perception in the world that this is a nation, and this way, when he's doing bad things with her, they'll have to do it hiddenly. That's all part of the high that he's going to get, is doing it where they have to be hidden because people think that she's a Neshishish. It just talks to the psyche of a person. When someone's out of control, he has crazy ideas of what he needs to do. Okay, Gewaltig. I thought that was a very interesting point that was like jumping right out at us, that I totally missed when I learned the Gemara the first time around. Gezakt Gemara weiter. Itmar. Eid Zomim. This is a big sugya. Eid Zomim l'mafreya hu nefsal. So on January 1st, 2025, someone says Eidus, that Reuven killed Shimon. That's probably not such a good Eidus, that Reuven borrowed $100,000 from Shimon. And then on January 5th, two Eidim came along and said, how could you say Eidus? That Reuven borrowed $100,000 from Shimon, and where was this? This was in Toronto. You were in Florida with me that day. So that shows us that on January 1st, he already said false Eidus. But he wasn't caught, so to speak, until January the 5th. Therefore, Abaye said, when does he become a apostle aid? The moment he said false testimony. When did he say false testimony? That would have been on January the 1st. So therefore, Abaye says, L'mafrei hu nifsal, the Eid Zoyim becomes apostle retroactively from when he said Eidus, which means any Eidus that he also said, even before he got caught, is now apostle. So if he signed on someone's star, this poor guy doesn't have a star, because it turns out that his Eidim were apostle. Rava says, no, Mikanu lahabahu nifsal. You're only apostle from the time that he was caught. Abaye Amar l'mafreyu nifsal, because me'idnu da'asid rashahu. The moment he said false testimony, he's corrupt. But Torah Amar al tashes yatcha im Russia. A Russia shouldn't be saying edus. Al tashes Russia aid. In Russia may not be an aid. Rava Amar. Now Rashi constantly sticks in that Al Tasha's Rasha Liyasaid, meaning a Rasha Linyane Mominus, right? We're going to discuss what if we already discussed that if someone is a Rasha because he's Mizana, he's still Lemon Legabedini Mominus, right? We learned that. We just learned that yesterday. So Rashi keeps on reminding us that it's a Rasha of Chametz. Rava Amar Mikanu Labohun himself. He's only possible moving forward. We already know he said false testimony a week earlier. Zogt Rava Eid Zoimim Chidushu. The whole concept of Eid Zoimim, that the second set of Eidim are believed, and the first set of Eidim are assumed to be Eidim Zoimim, that's a Chiddush in the Torah. Zogt Rashi, what is the Chiddush? Shenifsolim Shnayim Bishvil Shnayim Sha'imim Imanu Yisam. Why would you disqualify these two over those two? The Maichos the Samchas Ahani, Smoichahani. Who said you should be relying on this set of Eidim, on the second set of Eidim? Maybe believe the first set of Eidim. Elixer Sakosofu. The whole concept of Eidim Zoimimin is a Chiddush Negzer Sakosov. Hilchach Einlach Boy, Ella Mishas Chiddush Ve'elach, Mishas Shehuzam. Maichos the Samchas Ahani, Smoichahani, and therefore Ein Lach Boy, Ella Mishas Chiddush Ve'elach. The reason why the Eidim Zoimin is possible is not because they're not believed. It's because of the Chiddush of the din of Eidim Zoimin. That only came when they became Eidim Zoimin. And there's a lot of anomalies in the din of Eid Zoimim. For instance, an Eid Zoimim will get Malchus, and sometimes he'll get Malchus and he'll have, the Eidim will get Malchus. Now, do you ever get Malchus without Hasra? No time does anyone ever get an Einish without Hasra. Or sometimes you can get killed without any Hasra. No one wars the Eidim Zoimim before. You better not say this, otherwise you can get killed. So the fact that an Eid Zoimim gets killed without Hasra shows that this is not a typical situation. And there are those who learn the Eid Zoimim isn't getting killed because of the Einish for what he did. The Eid Zoimim is getting killed because there's a Chiddush HaTorah that makes this person into an Eid Zoimim. When does he get the status of Eid Zoimim? When the second set of Eidim came to Mazimim, not when he said his original testimony. And the status of Eid Zoimim, it leads to a death. But it's not an Einish for what he said, because to give normal Einshim, you need Eidim and Asra. So that in and of itself is all part of the Chiddush of Eid Zoimim. It's this new status that he's an Eid Zoimim that lets him, that tells us that we need to kill him. And therefore, it's a Chiddush. The Chiddush of when he becomes Pasul only begins when he was Muzam, and therefore it's Mikan v'Hala, it's Mikanu l'Haba, is where the Eid Zoimim becomes Pasul. Beautiful. Ikad Amri, there are those who say that Rava Namik Abaye is really. Rava agrees with Abaye, in fact, that an Eid Zoimim is Pasul l'Mafreya, because at the end of the day, we've determined that this person lied. And therefore, from then on, he's corrupt. Uman tam ka'amar mikanu laba. So why would Rava say mikanu laba? Zok gemar mishum pseidid l'kuchos. Because what if he actually did sign on a shtar mechira? Someone bought a property for $10 million, and this fellow, who was assumed to be an upstanding citizen, signed on the shtar, and then we find out that he was an Eid Zoimim. So now this poor lekech who bought this property and he had a shtar is now not going to own this property. So it's a takana. As Rashi says, people bought properties based on the edus of this aid who was assumed at that time to be a kosher aid. And this aid might have signed many shtaras between the time that he said the false testimony and the time that he was caught saying the false testimony. Nobody could have known. So there'll be so many unintended victims, and therefore, I guess it's at the Kondra Rabbanon that we will still validate any shtar that he signs on up until the point where we find that he was where he was caught. There's a very interesting Toshus that, if we have time, I want to go back to it. That says, why is that the Chiddush of Eid Zoimim, that the first set of Eidim are possible? Anytime two Eidim are makrish two Eidim, so two Eidim said Reuben killed Shimon, and two Eidim come along and say, no, Reuven didn't kill Shimon. They're both considered Mukcheshes, and you don't believe either. So there's no Chiddush in the fact that you don't believe the first Eidim. If anything, the Chiddush is that you believe the second set of Eidim. And they're not possible. Normally, when two Eidim are Mukchishim Zeh, they're both possible Mikanul Abba, because they're both suspect to be lying. But by Eid Zomim, the Chiddush is that the second set of Eidim is believed fully, and they're not suspect. So Tosfos has a discussion about it. The reason why I want to learn Tosfos is because there's a long Reb Kiveger on it, and Reb Kiveger ends off with Vashem Yor Einai. Vashem Yor Einai is the highest level of kasha that Reb Kiveger ever asks in the Gilyon Hashas. It's the highest level. Sometimes he says Tzarchin, sometimes he says Tzarchin Gadol, sometimes he says Tzarchin Gadol v'tzarch ani l'rav b'zeh, I need a Rebbe to teach to me, and sometimes he says Vashem Yor Einai. So this is like the biggest level of kasha that Kiveger has. So it would be nice to learn the kasha so we can appreciate what in Rebbe Kiveger's eyes was an unbelievable kasha. I always like saying over for my Rebbe Yitzchak Perman, where we were once learning a Gemara, and there was also a Gilyon Hashas that said the Shem Yor Einai. And Rebbe Yitzchak Perman, our Rebbe, Leben Stark was Hinton Tzontzak, he wanted to suggest maybe a teretz to Rebbe Kiveger's kasha. So he said, before I dare offer a teretz to Rebbe Kiveger's kasha, I want to tell you a story that with my Rebbe, Rav Kalevsky, who was his Rebbe in Baltimore. Rav Kalevsky once wanted to answer Rebbe Kiveger's kasha where he concludes the Tzarch Ani l'Rav b'zeh. So before he said his teretz, Rav Kalevsky said, I don't want to claim to be a Rebbe to Rebbe Kiveger, but I'm going to try to say this teretz. So someone in my class raised his hand and says, Rebbe, are you trying to be God for Rebbe Kiveger? Because this is Hashem Yor Einai. So that's the story I remember. The other story that I remember was there was a fellow who wrote a sefer for emptying all over Rebbe Kiveger's kashas, all over Shas and the Gilyon Hashas. And there are two questions of Rebbe Kiveger that he was not able to come up with a teretz with. And he went to get a haskama from a gadol, and the gadol wrote in his haskama, this person is such a choshev mensch, he truly understood two of Rebbe Kiveger's kashas. Gewaltig. Okay, Zok to Gemara weiter. So if we have time, we'll come back. Zok to Gemara weiter. So my benayu, the difference in between the two different pshatim in Rava, if it's really mikana olaba or it's only a takana, the hasidu betray, my benayu, Zok to Gemara, ike benayu, the hasidu betray bechad. What happened if two edim said an edim is on one of the two edim? Zok Rashi, my benayu. In Hanish Trey Time in Rava, Trey Bechad, Trey Kitois, Sheidu Bekatzu. There's two Kitois that said Edis on this first kat. Shnaim Omru, L'chol Echad, Imanu HaYisa, B'makim Ploni. There it's a Chiddush Leka, B'psed L'kul Chasicha. If we have two Edim that said on these two Edim, Imanu Yisem, it's 2 against 2. But what if you have two sets of Edim that come? One refers to Eid number 1 and says, you were with us in Florida. And the other two Edim are referring to Eid number 2, saying you were with us in Florida. So now it's 2 against 1. So if it's 2 against 1, that's no longer a Chiddush. So if that's no longer a Chiddush, then even Rava would agree that L'mafreyahu nifsal. But if the whole reason why Rava says Mikan Labo nifsal is just because of Pseudo L'kuchais, so that wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter if there were two sets of Edim, one Eid disqualifying, one set of Edim to disqualify each of our individual Edim, that wouldn't make a difference, because we still have to protect L'kuchais who are unaware that these Edim were possible at the time. So that's one nafkamina. We did two pshatim Rava. Inami de paslinu begazlanusa. They didn't say Imanu Yisem. What they said was of Rashi, Sha'idu shegazlanim hein al gzela shegozl b'nism. All they said was, is these Edim are possible because they stole before. So they weren't passing him by saying Imanu Yisem. They weren't even directly referencing that particular testimony. They were just saying these people are ganava. So therefore, Chiddush Leka, there's no Chiddush that we believe the second set of Edim. When we're directly contradicting your Edus, and we're saying you couldn't have said this Edus because you weren't there's an argument. Why should you believe us? Maybe believe them. But if we say you're Gazlanim for some other crime that you did, nobody's contradicting the second set of Edim. So there's no Chiddush in the fact that they're able to disqualify the first set of Edim. So there's no chiddush. The ha milsa achrini kamasadi. We're saying edus that possibly for a different reason, right? Who would if they would have said you're craving, right? It's a completely different thing that they're not being contradicted. But you still have the concept of pseudo lekuchos until the public knows that these people are pasal edus. Any star that they sign would be acceptable. Rabbi Yirmiyah B'difta said, "Avad Rav Papi uvda kavosei de Rava." Rav Papi paskin like Rava. Mar Bar Vashi Amar hilchasa kavosei de Abaye. We paskin like Abaye. Hilchasa kavosei de Abaye biyal kagam. We know there's 6 places in Shas where we paskin like Abaye, and they are the Rosh Tevis for those 6 cases are yal kagam. And the first one is Yud. That's what we all know because we learned that in Ascholos Gemara of Yish Shalom Midas. Abaye says Loi have a Yish, and we pass like Abaye. The Ayin is what we're learning right now. Eidnaim is it Lamafreya Unifsa or Mikanu Laba. We pass in this case like Beishamai, like Abaye. That is Mikanu Laba. The Lamed is in Hilchas Erevin. In Lech it says Lechi Ha'Aimid Me'elov. It's a Lechi that's not supported. In Erevin, there's a machlokes about that. Kuf is kedushin shaladim through labia. If it's a good kedushin, Gimel is about gilodas begitten, and the mem stands for mumur ochel nevelas lahachas. Okay, gewaltig. Now there's a very interesting point. Why is it, if we always paskin like Rava, why is it that we paskin like Abaye in these 6 cases? Now there are certain cases of the Yal Kakan in 2 of the 6 cases, not our case. The Gemara asks a kasha and says Tiyufta the Rava Tiyufta. When the Gemara says Tiyufta the Rava Tiyufta, it's very logical why in those cases we should pass like Abaye. But in our Gemara, we don't have anything that says Tiyufta the Rava Tiyufta. So Reuven Magula says, I'm sorry, he doesn't say it's the Noid Yehuda. The Noid Yehuda has a fascinating shtickle, and he shows how all of these 6 cases are totally in each other. And from the 2 tiyuftas, where in fact Rava is proven to be wrong, he shows how the other 4 cases are all totally in that case, and vibalt we paskin like Abaye in those 2 cases because of tiyufta. It's a very complicated long cheshbon that's hard to understand, that I never even looked at. I just heard about it. That through that, greater people than me, great Talmid Chacham said. It's a very hard, complicated thing that's way above our pay grade to understand what the Noid Yehuda is talking about. But he does say that it's all totally zebazeh, and that's why through 2 tiyuftas, it turns out that we pass like Abaye in these 6 cases. We're going to have now something that at first glance seems to be not making sense, seems to be irrational, but when we think into it, it'll make a lot of sense. Mumar oichel nevezel to oven. You have a mumar who's oichel nevezel to oven. Divrei akhel posel. Everybody else he's posel edus. You know why? Because what does it mean he's oichel nevezel to oven? It means he doesn't want to spend $15 a pound. He wants to spend $10 a pound. So that's mumminus. Someone who's eating the veil of the oven is the same steak that he could buy as an avela, he could buy as a kshera. The only difference is the price tag. So you see, he's someone who's going to compromise his values for money. So that's what everybody would agree, that he's possible for testimony on mumminus, because he's someone who will compromise his ideals for money. But what about lahachis? What if he's eating at lahachis? So then it's not about money at all. So you see, he won't compromise his values for money. He's doing it because he's a Rasha. So Abaye Amar Pasal. Abaye holds he's still Pasal, and he cannot say Edus. But Rav Amar Kosher, because just because he's a Rasha Lagabe eating Nevelis, that doesn't mean he's not going to be trustworthy when it comes to Dinah moments. Abaye Amar Pasal, Davale Rasha. The fact is, it makes him into a Rasha. For Achman Amar, Al Toshish Rasha 8. A Rasha cannot be an aid. For Rav Amar Kosher, because Rasha the Chamas Bina. It's not stam any Rasha that's not believed. On Edus, it's only a Rasha regarding Dinei Mamas. So that's our machlokes. Any Rasha is not qualified to say Edus, or is it only a Rasha involving monetary issues? Meisei Frektigmar. Al Toshesh Rasha. So that's where it's counterintuitive, because it's much worse to eat Nevelis Lahachis than to eat Nevelis L'Te'oven. Yet, if you ate Nevelis Lahachis, you're going to be believed in your age, it's according to Rava. But if you ate it, let's say oven, you wouldn't be believed. Mesve, al tashes Rasha ate, and the Brisa tells us, al tashes Chamas ate. Who is this referring to? Elu Gazlonim. These are referring to Gazlonim. Umay alim b'shvuais, and people who violate the Isser of Shvuais. Mylav, what type of Shavuos? It says Shavuos plural. So there's different types of Shavuos. So there's the two types of Shavuos, the two categories of Shavuos that the Brisa is most likely referring to is Echad Shavuos Shav, V'echad Shavuos Mammon. The Shavuos Mammon, Shavuos Moite B'Miktas, that I understand shows that I'm going to compromise my morals for money. But a Shavuos Shav, meaning I swear that this is a chair. I swear that today is day, right? Or a Shavuos Sheker is I swear that this is a table, or I swear that by day that it's night, by night that it's day. Those are some wasteful Shavuos. They have a Chaymer Isser of Shavuos, but nevertheless, they don't show that he's compromised. L'gabi is the mamas, l'gabi mammon. And since it says Shavuos, Lashon Rabbim, it must be referring to both these categories of Shavuos. And you have a Klor Raya to Abaye Shita, that just because he swears falsely, nothing to do with money, he will no longer be believed. Zok Gemara, no. Loi idi v'idi Shavuos mammon. The two Shavuos that the Brisa refers to are both Shavuos mammon. Umay Shavuos, so why is it a lashon of plural? Let's just say Shavuah, because there's only one class of Shavuah, Shavuah of mammon. It means Shavuos Doma. It means in the world, these Shavuos will disqualify you from being an aid, but it means only for Shavuos regarding them. Basically, let's have another kasha. Al Toshes Rasha aid, Al Toshes Chamas aid, Elu Gazlonim, this is referring to Gazlonim, Umalve Beribis. Umalve Ribios. And Umalve Beribis. But if you notice, what's glaringly omitted is Oichel Nevelas Lahachas. Why wouldn't the Brisa have listed off, according to Abaye, Oichel Nevelas Lahachas? The Brisa B'davka only lists Mammonistike Averis. So Gemara Tiyufta, Abaye Tiyufta. So here we have a Tiyufta da Abaye, and we still paskin like Abaye. But Dr. Gemara, name it Katanoi. You're right, Abaye. We have a raya against Abaye from this Brisa that we just quoted, but we're going to show you that there's a machlokes tanoim about it, and Abaye could align himself with a different Tan. I guess because at that point in the Gemara didn't know about the other Tan yet. It always happens that they don't know, right? Novak Dok Vashkach, they often didn't know Brises. Zokmar Neme Katanoi. Eid Zoimim Posel L'chol HaTorah. And the Eid Zoimim is possible for any testimony in the Torah. Divrei Rab Meir. Now, it doesn't make a difference if this Eid Zoimim lied about a monetary issue, or if this Eid Zoimim lied about a non-monetary issue. When do we say that an Eid Zoimim is Pasal L'chol HaTorah? That's if he was Huzam in the Dini Nefashis. Aval Huzam B'Dini Mamonis, but if it was Huzam for Dini Mamonis, kosher L'Dini Nefashis. Because just because someone would lie about Dini Mamonis, it doesn't necessarily mean that he would lie for Dini Nefashis. Rashi says that Nafkamina is, things are more severe. When it comes to Mamonis, it's not such a severe issue. There someone will lie. But he's not going to lie to kill somebody, right? That's a much more severe thing. So Zok to Gemara, once you see a machlokes tanoim about comparing severity of Yisurim, and based on the severity, that will determine if he's possible or not, let's suggest, name Abaye Kreb Meir, say Abaye holds a Kreb Meir, or Rava Kreb Yosy. And Rashi explains, why would you say Abaye aligns with Reb Meir? The Hainunami Mekula L'chumra. Reb Meir holds, it doesn't make a difference if you were Eid Zoimim. On Dinim Mamonis, you'll still be possible Medina Nefashos. Because once we see you're not trustworthy, we don't trust you anywhere. Zokt Rashi, the Oichel Nevelos, someone who eats Nevelos, Rala Shemayim. He's only Rala Shemayim. It's a Bein Odom Lamokim de Kavera. Bein Rala Brios. He could be the nicest, most honest fellow around. Nevertheless, he's still going to be possible. Avol Meid Sheker, the Mamoin, but if someone is going to say Edus by Mamoin, he's worse than someone eating Nevelos, because he's Rala Shemayim Virala Brios. Not only does he not take seriously his bin adam lamakim, he doesn't even take seriously his bin adam lachaveroi. Sharei mafsidon beidusoi. With his testimony, he is hurting somebody financially. The kaposel Abaye, Abaye holds that he's possible mishum nevelos ladies to mom. So just because someone ate an avel hakas, where he does it has no impact whatsoever on anybody else, it's just between him and the mokim. Nevertheless, we still say we're not going to trust him for something more severe, like din mominis, where he is sai doing something connected to Rebbeinu Shalom, and sai doing something connected to a person. So that's where you see Abaye will align himself with the mayor, because the mayor holds someone who does a smaller crime is not even trusted for a greater crime. That's Abaye sheet as well. Someone who only zindigs Beinadam Lamokim is not even believed for Beinadam Lachaver. But Rava Yosy, Rava holds a Yosy, meaning what you're huzum for, what not. So therefore, just because I'm going to eat nevelos lahachis, it doesn't mean I'm going to go further and violate somebody else and steal and cause them to lose money. So you have over here Abaye can align himself with Reb Meir, and therefore Abaye has a way out. Name Abaye Reb Meir, Reb Yosy. Abaye Reb Meir, Omar, he says, Amrina mikula l'chumra. Even though he only violated a kula, meaning only b'nadam l'makim, we don't trust him even for something which is b'nadam l'chaverei. And of course, we know b'nadam l'chaverei always has a b'nadam l'makim component. So b'nadam l'chaverei is always considered more severe than b'nadam l'makim. V'Rava damar Rabbi Yosy, and Rava Rabbi Yosy damar mechumer l'kula amrinan, but mikula l'chumer lo amrinan. If he would violate din nefashis, then he will violate din mominis. But just because someone violated an isser of nevelos lahachis, it doesn't mean he will violate somebody and lie in a testimony. We don't have to say that both Abaye and Rava are totally the machlokes. Rather, there's no way Abaye could align himself with Rabbi Yosy, because according to Rabbi Yosy, eating nevelos lahachis for sure should not passel you from saying yedus. But keep ligi aliva Rabbi Meir. But it is possible that Rava could hold like Reb Meir. Abaye Reb Meir, at first glance, Abaye holds like Reb Meir, so now we have a Tana who Abaye could connect to. But even Rava might hold like Reb Meir, because the Rava, at kan loy kam Reb Meir hasam. Why did Reb Meir say over there that even though you're over on dinei mominus, you're not believed for dinei nefashis, elagabe eid zaymim? That's dafka by an eid zaymim, the moment of mammon. You know why? The ral shemayim v'ralabrios. Yes, it's not as severe as dinei nefashis in one perspective, but in the other perspective, you're violating shemayim and you're violating brios. So therefore, it's equal to dinei nefashis in a way, because dinei nefashis is also ral shemayim v'ralabrios, although it's much worse labrios. You're not just taking away his money, but you're taking away his life as well. But it does touch on the two main components. Abul hacha, the ral shemayim, they ral brios. But someone who's only eating the nevelos lahachis, or he's not touching at all and violating any other person, loy lav dafka would we say that he's not believed like about anything else. And therefore, now that Abaye has Reb Meir to hold like, the hilchos come say to Abaye, we pass like Abaye. Freit Gemara, how could you pass like Abaye? Well, he toisef. Didn't we just say tiyufto da Abaye tiyufto? So Gemara, hahi Rabbi Yosy, the brisa from where we challenged Abaye was the brisa that passes like Rabbi Yosy, and we pass like Rabbi Meir, and therefore Abaye, we pass like Abaye because we're going to pass like Rabbi Meir. Freit the Gemara, but to have a nami Rabbi Yosy, I don't understand. Let's say the brisa from where we asked the kasha on Abaye from was Rabbi Yosy, but Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yosy halacha Rabbi Yosy. We paskin whenever Rabbi Meir argues with Rabbi Yosy, we paskin like Rabbi Yosy. So Oibazoi is still shver on Abaye, because Abaye will not stim with Rabbi Yosy. So Aklimar Shiny Hasam, when it comes to this discussion of Chumra and Kula, and if he's not believed Lagabe Adavar Kal, he's also not believed Lagabe Adavar Chumar, Hasam, the Sosam Lontana Kreb Meir. We have a Stam Mishnah. And when you have a Stam Mishnah, then we pass like Reb Meir. We don't pass like Reb Meir. The teretz is, you know why? By a Stam Mishnah we pass like Reb Meir? Because we remember there's a whole rule. Stam Mishnah is Reb Meir and Stam Brisa is, well, and lists off all the different Talmidim of Rabbi Kiva. Right? Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir, Stam Bryce is another Tana who's also Talmud of Rabbi Kiva, and Stam Tosefta is this, and then the Gemara says, and they're all Libid Rabbi Kiva, meaning they're all saying over the loch of the Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva we paskin like. So the reason why Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir is not because we paskin like Rabbi Meir against Rabbi Yosy. It's because we paskin like Rabbi Kiva, and the Stam Mishnah is Rabbi Meir just repeating the words of Rabbi Kiva. So v'hecha sasam alam, where do we have a Stam Mishnah that says, like Reb Meir, that once someone is not believed for Mominus, that once someone's not believed for Mominus, he also won't be believed in the Fashers. Kiha de Bar Chama. There was a fascinating story that occurred with Bar Chama. What happened? Kotol Nafsha. He murdered someone. Omer le Reish Kalusa, le Ravaba, bar Yaakov. They didn't have a Sanhedrin in those days, so they couldn't pass it on him Lamisa, but they couldn't let him run free either. So the Reish Galusa instructed Rabbi Yaakov, Poik Ayimba, you need to look into this case. Ivade Kotel, if he actually did kill, you need to blind him. Where does this weird psak come from? To blind. So Rashi actually has three pshat. Either it means Yinakburis Einov, the bottom is his best, the high Knosok Kavdin Bay. The question is, how could a Besna on their own do that? So there are those who learn that it was the Reish Galusa who was calling for this. The Reish Galusa can do extrajudicial punishments, b'toris melech, and that's his authority to do that. The Bezdin makin v'oinchin shalom in Torah. Yitlu mamoino v'yitlu yarshim. Maybe what he was suggesting when he said blind him is take away all his money and let the yarshim of his victim get all his money. V'yeshamim shamta, put him into cherem. Zotrash for Risha Nicker, I believe that they actually wanted to blind his eyes, and they had a right to do that. Okay, so what happened? Also, Trey Sahadi, they brought two Adam to say testimony that this fellow Bar Chama killed. Asidu Bey, the Vadai Kotel. They brought Adus that he killed. Also, you. So what did Bar Chama do to protect himself? He tried to undermine the witnesses. And what did he do? Isi Trey Sahadi, he brought two Adam to at least disqualify one of the two Adam that testified against him. Once he disqualifies even one of those two Adam who testified against him, he's free. So Asidu Bey bechad mehanach. Asidu Bey bechad mehanach. He brought two Eidim to say Eidus to disqualify one of the two Eidim that were testifying against him. Chad Omer Kamoidi Di Ganov Kavod Chushla. One said, "I saw this Eid kill steal a kav of Sa'ir Klufin of barley." Chad Omer, and the second Eid said, "Kamoidi Di Ganov Kata, the handle of the burtai, which is something of cattle prod or spear." So you see also that when they're disqualifying him, they don't have to both see the same gzela. As long as they're each saying testimony, he's a gazlan, that will be a disqualification. Amr lei, my daitach. Now, just because they're disqualified by Dina Mamonith, which is a Dover Akal, who said that they're not believed for Dina Nefashos, which is a Dover Achamer. Remember, according to Reb Meir, if they were proven guilty of theft, they won't be believed on Dina Nefashos. But Rabbi Yosy holds, if they're proven guilty of theft, they would still be believed in the Nefashos, which is a Dover Chomer. So Amalei Ma'adaitach Kerab Meir. So they told him. So they told him. So why are you suggesting that you've successfully disqualified Adam? Because you hold a Reb Meir, and according to Reb Meir, if you prove that they're Ganovim, they're not believed even for Din Nefashos. The problem is Reb Meir, Reb Yosy, Alachak Reb Yosy, and Reb Yosy. Amar, what did he say? Who's on bedine mamonis? Kosher l'dine nefashos. So just because you prove that they steal money, that doesn't disqualify them from dine nefashos. So sorry, Bar Chama, you're still in trouble because your two Adam are still nemon to say testimony that you are murderer. Amalei Rav Papi. So Rav Papi said, and there are those who learned that Rav Papi was not on the Bezdin. He was a bystander, and we will soon see why this is what happened. When do we pass like Rabbi Yosy connected Rabbi Meir? That's if there's no Stam Mishnah. We have a Stam Mishnah that tells us that even though they're proven to be Gazlanim and Dinim Mamonis, which is a Dover Akal, they won't even be trusted on Dinim Nefashos, which is a Dover Acham. Where do we see this? Mimai. If it's from the following Mishnah. It says in the Mishnah as follows. Any person who could paskin on Dina Nefashos, Royu Lodun Dinim Mamonis. he could pass in the Mamonis. Meaning, if he's choshed on dinin, if he's not choshed for a dinin nefashis, then automatically he could pass on dinin Mamonis. So, Mani, who is the Stam Mishnah? Who is the Tana of this Mishnah that doesn't have an identification of who said it? Ilayma Rabbi Yosy. If you want to say this is going to Rabbi Yosy, that's not true. This fact would not be true. Because if you had someone who was muzam on a case of moment, the kosher ladinin nefashis, he would be kosher for dinin nefashis, and he would be possible ladinin mamanis. So if you have a mission that says that anybody who's kosher for dinin nefashis is kosher for dinin mamanis, according to Rabbi Yosy, that's simply not true, because you could be kosher for dinin nefashis, and you could be possible for dinin mamanis. Elav Meir, he must be going according to Rabbi Meir, and now we have a stam mishnah that says that if you're kosher for dinin nefashis, you're kosher for dinin mamanis, and therefore it proves that these Edom are going to be possible, okay? Because these Edom, the Baal are proven to be gazlonim. Forget the Baal are proven to be gazlonim. They cannot be trusted even for dinin nefashis. So there's our star mishnah. Zog to Gemara mimai. That's not a good star mishnah. You're assuming that the mishnah is discussing a psul relevant to someone who said false testimony. That's not at all what the mishnah is talking about. Dilma bepsula yuchsin koi. Maybe it's just talking about psul yuchsin, meaning if someone is kosher to dan dinin mamanis, he's not necessarily kosher to dan dinin nefashis. But if he's kosher for dinin nefashis, he's surely kosher for dinin mamanis. And Rashi tells us who those are: a ger and a mamzer. A ger and a mamzer can sit on the bezdin of dinin mamanis, but they cannot sit on the bezdin of dinin nefashis. So, anybody who, because of yuchsin, can sit on the bezdin of dinin nefashis can also sit on the bezdin of dinin mamanis. That's according to everybody. That doesn't show you anything l'gabe the halacha of someone who was caught lying. And I'll prove it to you that that's what the Mishnah is referring to, psula yuchsin, and not a psul because they became eidayim. Tileitem hachi, sefer de katani, the end of this very same Mishnah says, Yesh royu lodin dinei mamanis. There are people who could pass on dinei mamanis. Ve'ein royu lodin dinei nefashis. And the way we're going to learn it means like a ger or a mamzer could pass on dinei mamanis, but he can't pass on dinei nefashis. If you're going to learn, we're talking about someone who lied, then I would ask you, Amai einei royu? I don't understand. Why would somebody not be royu lodin dinei nefashis? Must be the itzam b'dinin nefashis, right? Somebody wasn't royal lodin dinin nefashis. Why not? Because he was proven to be a liar once with dinin nefashis. That would have disqualified him. Frankly, Gemara, if he was disqualified from dinin nefashis, royal lodin dinin mamanis, would anybody hold that he could pass dinin mamanis? Madach, he's willing to lie to kill somebody. Surely he's going to be willing to lie to make somebody lose money. For divra koil pasul, Sarah Meir and Sarah Yosy agree that someone who will kill somebody surely can't be believed for dinah mamanis. So that cannot be what the Bryce is talking about. The Bryce cannot be talking about Edom Zaymin, must be talking about Psol Yosin, Elav Psol Yosin Kai. Achanami, Psol Yosin Kai. So we're still looking for a Stam Mishnah that supports Reb Meir. Elahacha Kasosam Lontan. We have another Mishnah that supports Reb Meir. Did not be learned. Elohein Apsulim. This is the list of those that are possible for Eidos and for Dayanis. Hamasachet b'Kuvya, Umal v'Beribis, Umafriche Yoinim, V'Soichrei Shavias, V'Avadim. Zaklal. This is the general rule. Kol Eidos she'eino isha ksher law. Any Eidos that a woman wouldn't be believed, Afhein, so too, ein ksher law, these people wouldn't be kosher for either. So Zok Gemara Mani. Who is this Mishnah following? Ilemi Rabbi Yosy. If this is going to Rabbi Yosy, what are you talking about? For Uke Eidos b'dinin nefashis, you can have Eidos by dinin nefashis. She'eina isha ksher law, that a woman is not going to be believed for an aid on dinin nefashis. Then ksher law, but these would be ksher law because just because you're apostle for dinin mamanis that doesn't necessarily mean you would lie for dinin nefashis. So this is not consistent with Rabbi Yosy, this Mishnah. And Elav Reb Meir, he must be going according to Reb Meir, who says that even if you're disqualified for dinin mamanis, you're also going to be disqualified for dinin nefashis. So now that we proved a Stam Mishnah like Reb Meir, we passed like Reb Meir, so because of that, the two Edom that Bar Chama brought that disqualified one of the Edom who was condemning him to death, even though they only disqualified the Edom Abidin Mominus, we pass like Reb Meir, there's the Stam Mishnah, that did not believe the din in the Fashas either, and now Bar Chama just got exonerated. So what happened? Kom Bar Chama Noshke Akare, he went and kissed Rav Papi, who was the one who brought up the idea to show that we pass like Reb Meir, which ultimately helped exonerate him. He gave him a kiss, the kible lekarge dechol shnei, and he was willing to pay the full taxes that Rav Papi was liable to pay for the whole year. So the first question you would ask is, shoichat is also for a dayan to take, not only before he paskins the case, but after he paskins the case as well. So how could Rav Papi have accepted it? That's why I mentioned earlier, the Mefarshim say that Rav Papi was not one of the dayanim. He was a watching bystander, and he threw out this idea. So Bar Chama was allowed to reward him. He thanked him for coming up with this idea that was able to ultimately exonerate him. These are the list of relatives that cannot be believed, cannot be trusted to say testimony on behalf of the relative. Achiv, his brother, Vachayav, his uncle, paternal uncle, Vachay Imoy, and his maternal uncle, Ubal Achoisoi, his brother-in-law, Ubal Achois Aviv, and his uncle, meaning the person who married his father's sister, Ubal Achois Imoy, and the husband, the husband of the sister of his mother, Ubal Imoy, and the husband of his mother, meaning if his mother remarried, her husband would not be believed. V'cham of his mother-in-law, V'gisai is his brother-in-law, Hein, them, Uvenein and their children, V'chasnein and their sons-in-law, V'chargoi levadoi. Chargoi means his wife's child. If his wife has a child, he's not neman for his wife's child. Rabbi Yosy, Zu Mishnah's Rabbi Kiva. This Mishnah that only disqualifies people that are related to you from your father's side, that's talking about paternal relatives, that's the Mishnah's Rabbi Kiva. Aval Mishnah Rishayna included Daida, his uncle, Uvein Daida, and his cousin, V'chol Haroyu Liyarshay, V'chol Akarav Loy. V'chol Akarav Loy Ba'oisha. Anybody who would have been related to him at the time that he saw this thing happen. So is, I apologize, Kiva was even including relatives of the mother, but the Mishnah Rishona only included paternal relatives, as Rashi says, which our Mishnah lists off as someone who is not believed for you. The Mishnah Rishona held that it was kosherloi, since you could never yarshin that person and they can't yarshin you, so there's no financial tie between the two, and therefore you would be believed. Okay, but Oyster Shah means, I'm sorry, that's what the Mishnah Rishona held, but Rabbi Kiva said not. Rabbi Kiva said any relation. As long as he was not a relative at any time relevant to this case, he would be believed. Okay, how about Hayakarav in this rachet? What if he was related and then he's not related? For instance, he's a son-in-law and then he divorced his wife, or his wife died, so now he's not related anymore. Hareza kosher. What if a man marries a woman and his wife dies, so he's no longer related to his father-in-law? But what if he still has children? If he still has children, that still connects him to his wife's family, and he would still be a karev. He wants his children to yarshin, right? If you have a particular love for somebody or a particular hatred for somebody, those would be possible. What is an oyev? Zeshush binoi. It's somebody who was one of the wedding party. So it doesn't mean forever. A friend you are named for, but during the week of your chasna, the best man or whoever would be filling that position would be possible to say ages for. And if you hate somebody, what is a soine? Someone who you didn't speak to for 3 days. Why? Because you were angry at him. There's many people that we don't speak to for 3 days. It just means if it's because you're angry at him, so you don't want to talk to him. Amalei told him, we're not choshed Klal Yisrael, No one's going to say false testimony about somebody because he's upset at him. V'davka be'edus pligi. Avol bedin moidule rabban in the apostle I love him. Of course, you're not allowed to paskin for somebody, even if you're a soine or if you're an oyev, because that's going to make it hard for your mind to see their schus or to see their chayv. How do we know that relatives are puzzle for edus? The Tanur Rabbanan, it says in the pasuk, "Yumtzu Abaye Salbanim." Fathers shouldn't die because of the affairs of their children. But we're learning they shouldn't die because of the testimony of their children. Ma tamad loimer. What is the pasuk trying to teach us? Im lelamed shelo yumtzu avos ba'avayin banim ubanim ba'avayin avos. If what the pasuk is trying to teach us is that we won't punish a father for his son's affairs and vice versa, we already have a pasuk for that. A person will die for his own affairs, but not for his father's affairs or his son's affairs. Ella, what it must mean when it says it means be'edus banim, ubanim loyimtzu alavos, it means be'edus avos. Frank the Gemara, ubanim ba'avayin avos loy. Are you telling me that a son does not get punished for his father's affairs? Vaksiv, doesn't it say poiked avoyin avos albanim? So it says that a son does get punished for his father's affairs. When children follow the bad path of parents, in fact, they will be punished for their father's affairs as well. Kedetanya, itam yimaku. When is that? When will they be punished for their father's affairs? Is kisha'oichsin ma'aseh avesayim b'yadeim. You're telling me only if they do the same affairs. Maybe regardless, they will be punished for their father's affairs. The Torah says a person only gets punished for his own affairs. It must be the only way that you will get punished for your father's affairs if you do his affairs. It's a down the Svarim that a person who knows his father did certain affairs should double down on being more nizer in those affairs. Are you telling me that you're not going to get punished for your father's affairs or for anybody else's affairs unless you do them yourself? And we dashin ish ba'avan we're all arv to each other. So in fact, we do get punished for other people's affairs. The only time you get punished for somebody else's affairs is if you were in a position to prevent them from doing those affairs and you didn't, that's when you'll be punished. Otherwise, you're scot-free. Okay, we'll stop here.